First Corinthians 14 verse 34, women should remain silent in the churches. They're not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. On the surface, this seems very harsh.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible.
Today is day 336, covering 1 Corinthians 12, 13 and 14.
Nice. So just jumping straight in. We've had quite a lot of banter back and forth in the last few episodes to begin with, but let's try and just jump straight in today. So 12 verses 7 through to 11 just is basically a nice list of the various fruits of the Spirit. And so it goes through talking about wisdom, knowledge, healing, miraculous powers, prophecy, distinguishing between spirits, sort of discernment is what that can be called, tongues, and interpretation of tongues. And I kind of like the way that's just all put together in there. Interestingly, I don't know if that's actually where it's called fruits of the Spirit or whether that's somewhere else, because then slightly later in 27, it actually lists the gift of the Spirit, which is prophecy, teaching, apostleship, miracles, healing, helping, guidance, and tongues. And so, like, what are we seeking, which is what we chatted about the other day, and we should eagerly desire the greater gift. So it's like there's so much available to us through knowing God that, like, yes, other people can be wise. They can, I suppose a lot of it have knowledge. A lot of it I'm like, distinguishing between tongues, maybe not so much without Jesus. But, you know, there are some people that can have everything together by a worldly standard, but actually we can get that stuff not through our own strength, just through God being like, have a little bit of extra knowledge there, Mr. Peters, looks like you need it, you're struggling today.
That's good, man. Yeah, absolutely. Building on that, we talked about gifts 2 episodes ago, I think. So the idea that there are all these many gifts which God can give us, this is from 1231 that I based this, but this is a question more than anything above my pay grade, but I wondered if gifts are kind of distributed similarly to how it says in the parable of the talents, or, you know, this idea that if you use what I give you, I'll give you more, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So if we actively are pursuing the great gifts, as it says, eagerly desiring them, then not only will we get better at the ones that God gives us, but maybe more will be open to us, right? Whereas if we're a bit skeptical, so for example, I'll put my hand up and be like, I've never spoken in tongues. I'm still a bit, I know that it's biblical. I'm not saying it's not, but I still have this thing about it. Yeah. So while I'm in that mode, I don't see how it'll ever be given to me.
True.
It's less likely, right? And certainly interpreting them, right?
Yeah.
But who knows, in a different place, if I'm using gifts that God's given me more, maybe that will be opened up to me at some point.
Yeah. And to put that into context, Melody's dad, who's one of the most faithful people that I know, he doesn't speak in tongues. And so it's not like it's a gateway gift, as people call it, where it's like, oh, well, you should speak in tongues first before you get the other ones. It's like, no, that's not true at all. Because, I mentioned before, I believe that a lot of speaking in tongues is human, and just speaking random syllables and noises, that just my heart posture when I'm doing that. And I believe that God has really honed that and developed that in me. I know other people have just had it where they just feel like their tongue is working completely separate to what their brain's telling it to do. And who's to say what is right and what is wrong, really? It's all gravy.
Love that. Yeah. Keep going, mate.
So this is 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7 is one of the most quoted scriptures at weddings, because it's love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres, which is a great definition of what love looks like. While we're in Africa and Uganda, Nicola Neal, she went over this with us, but actually she told us to replace love with Jesus, and that's who Jesus is. So it's Jesus is patient, Jesus is kind, Jesus does not envy, he does not boast, he is not proud, all the way through. And then again to go through it and replace that with am I. and you say, am I patient? Well, I failed step one, fan bloody tastic. Am I kind? Do I envy? Do I boast? Am I proud? Do I dishonor others? Am I self-seeking? Like all these things. And it's like, flip, am I falling short of the mark, man? Because when we do it in that way, it's easy to read that verse and be like, oh yeah, that's so beautiful. Thanks very much. But actually, when you break it down and you apply it to your own life, man, it can be eye-opening.
And that is good. That is very good. That's really, and it's one of Stephanie's favorite verses. So I will be telling her that later tonight. That's awesome.
That's right. Next time she gets annoyed at you, we're like, "Oh, are you being easily angered?" Yeah, says love is not easily angered.
Love that. This is sort of on a slightly different tangent, but again on like a challenging yourself thing or perspective thing. So 13 verses 11 and 12. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. And now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So it's just encouragement as well, right? Like we may think, you and I or other people may think we've like really nailed a verse, even just one verse in the whole Bible. Like I understand that.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You don't. You know it better, and that's good. But we're just children, and that's a good thing because Jesus said that, like, you know, we need to be like a child to even enter the kingdom of heaven, right? But when we die and we meet Jesus and we can have all of our questions answered, we'll finally be truly men, truly what God created us to be in a way that we will never be able to on this planet. And it's just kind of cool. It's the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely, it is, mate. That's good. Love it.
Sweet.
So into 14 then, unless you did have one thing at the end of 13. Or just
what you said was perfect. Actually, I was just going to say everything is fueled by love, and then what you said about Jesus is patient, kind, etc. It's the same thing, right? Everything's fueled by.
That's true. Yeah, because at the end it's saying that these who remain faith, hope, and love. The greatest of them is love, and that's the important. Yep. So 14 verse 3, just speaking briefly about prophecy, it's saying those who prophesy speak to people for their strengthening, encouragement, and comfort. I think people can use prophecy as a way of telling people they're doing stuff wrong and being like, oh, you really shouldn't do that, or actually this is not correct, like all that stuff. But actually, if we're prophesying, and that's one thing, if you think you've heard God's voice for someone else, it's a good thing to weigh it against those things. Am I strengthening? Am I encouraging? Am I bringing comfort to that person? If the answer is no to any of those, that probably wasn't from God. That's probably a you thought for them, which might be a good thing for them, but it's not a God thing for them.
Right. Yeah. That's really interesting, man. And I suppose that's then has to be balanced with what you're saying before about Spurs and stuff, right? Sometimes something in the moment might not seem comforting, for example, but ultimately is of comfort. Like, go on, if you can just do this or whatever, like right now you're not quite there, but if you do that and then that future could bring comfort. That's cool. I love that. So if the whole church comes together and everyone speaks in tongues and inquirers or unbelievers come in, will they not say that you're out of your mind? We talked a little bit about this earlier in the episode. So 1 Corinthians 14:23. That's exactly what happened. I think we told the story before on the channel, but that's exactly what happened when Adam took me to a certain church one time.
Yeah.
Everyone in there pretty much, or it felt like that to me, was speaking in tongues and everything. And I was just so overwhelmed by it because I'd never seen or experienced it before.
Yeah.
So just a small thing there. Next one, I don't remember, but it's got a link to it. So it's got to be pretty good. So 1 Corinthians 14, verse 34, women should remain silent in the churches. They're not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. On the surface, this seems very harsh. I know a lot of people give Christians, a lot of flack for this one. But many say that the translation should not talk actually is more about when the pastor is speaking, the idea of like chattering, not actually being silent, but just being respectful of teaching, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's this whole link, maybe I'll get you, Adam, to put it in there so you can read it in your own times, but a lot of reasons why it's not actually telling women to like shut up in church or anything horrible like that.
A lot of that, I heard a really good point on that exact point, where it was the men were typically well educated, the women that were allowed in there weren't. So it was more, don't ask questions, don't be constantly interrupting and asking questions. Right. It's just a case of this is the kind of thing you can ask later afterwards. It's not saying women aren't allowed to talk because women aren't allowed to talk. It's saying that if you're uneducated and you're not sure, don't be constantly interrupting.
Right.
wait till the point is made, the sermon's finished or whatever was going on at the time, and then have that question. So yeah, good point, bro. Love it. Tomorrow then, a bit more of 1 Corinthians, the end of it, 15 and 16. Pick up your Bible, get reading. Feel free to share this with someone. It might just do them the power of good. Ooh.